Well, hello again. Welcome to Horror in Detail. Today we are going to share Goatman encounter stories. First story. This story was shared by you/silent writer watching. I met Goatman in the woods last night. I love hiking. I love walking into the trees, getting further and further from civilization. The sounds of industry grow dimmer and dimmer, the sounds of nature take over. But that was before last night. Before last night I thought I knew what was in the forest. I was sure that the most dangerous thing was a hungry bear or a twisted ankle miles from help. I may have been a fragile female, as my father liked to claim, but I was tough. I had more than enough knowledge and experience of basic survival. But meeting monsters, meeting Goatman. I expected none of that when I waltzed into the woods for what I figured was a routine overnight trip. I'd done it many times before, rolled into the parking lot of the Appalachian Trail at 8 a.m., armed with a small tent and the backpack it was attached to. My backpack was packed with food, water, a flashlight, a change of clothes, a first aid kit, a lighter. I was prepared. I thought I was prepared. It's always after I've gotten out of my Subaru and moved to the hatchback of it that I take in any others in the lot. A couple and their dog were making their way into the forest, another car was already locked and left, and a pair of men, big guys wearing camo. They were hanging out by the tailgate of a truck, beers in hand. I turned away as one of them seemed to notice me looking. I could feel their eyes on me, though I ignored it. I glanced at them only briefly. They had fishing poles. Why do you need camouflage for fishing? I had thought to myself. I was focused on getting my gear out, so I didn't notice at first when one of them walked closer. His foot finally landed on a branch, that telltale crunch alerting me to his presence. He reeked, a mixture of cheap beer, sweat and grease. He was smiling a gap-toothed grin. His beard was ragged. When he spoke the stench grew. Better be careful out there, darling, these woods get dark at night. His eyes trailed over me. I puked a little in my mouth. Thanks, I forced a grin, but I think I'll be fine. I finished putting my backpack on with a pointed clip of the chest strap. He grinned wider, though he took the hint and stepped back. I closed the hatch and moved past him, not bothering to fake politeness any longer, keeping my eyes ahead of me. I pressed lock on my key fob and dropped the keys into one of my cargo pants pockets. The man and his friend were chuckling as I made my way across the bridge toward where the trailhead split. The sound made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I felt watched long after I turned the corner out of sight, following the creek down into the valley between the mountains. I should have left, shouldn't have ignored the way my instincts were screaming. Fortunately, I was good at ignoring things by pushing them to the back of my mind. By noon it was all but forgotten. The silence was strong, only broken by the occasional cry of a bird or the gentle rustle of leaves as a squirrel hopped by. It was a deep sort of silence that only the white noise of the breeze blowing through the trees could achieve. That's why I hiked. I could let it all go, focus on nothing but my footsteps, my breathing, the quiet murmur of the river. I stopped for a granola bar at what was probably an hour past last time I looked. I wasn't concerned with time at the time, so I can't say for sure. I sat on a rock a little off the path. It overlooked a small pond, where the water pooled before spilling down along the river. It was then, amidst the bubbling of the brook and the crinkling of my wrapper, that I first heard it. It made me pause. I think I stopped mid-chew. It didn't fit in at all with the forest sounds I was accustomed to. It was wrong. It took a couple seconds before it registered as words, sounding as if they were being said through auto-tune or Google Translate, like there was a filter of hesitation or misunderstanding. Wrong. Way. This. Let's. That. Garbled, inconsistent, like catching every other word of a sentence without the proper pause or context needed for the missing words. Look. Trail. Way. I was frozen, completely and utterly. I stopped breathing. The footsteps came next, with no pace or rhythm to them. I was reminded of my 11th birthday, when we went horseback riding. It wasn't a clip-clop, but it was close enough that my mind conjured up images of the Jersey Devil stamping its way through the woods, though the Pine Barrens are about 100 miles south. A breeze blew by and with it came the stench. Rotting meat, like when I'd found that dead cat under our back porch, maggots writhing as they gorged on the dead flesh. I gagged and had to clamp a hand over my mouth to stop from retching. My eyes watered, mostly from the smell, but maybe a tiny bit because fear had taken hold of me. My heart beat like a drum in my chest as those footsteps got closer and closer. I pressed myself to the tree blocking me from sight of the path. It felt like an eternity before it was passing behind me. I could hear its wheezing breath, deep and labored, as it lumbered down the trail. And then it was gone around a bend, crooning something about, look. Leaves. Trail. I sat on that rock, not daring to move, for minutes after. I was at war inside my mind, trying desperately to convince myself that I'd imagined it or that it wasn't what it seemed. Maybe it was a confused old man lost in the woods. Maybe a dying deer was downstream somewhere, that explained the smell. But I pushed it to the back of my mind, shaking my head. If I don't think about it, then it doesn't worry me. I pushed myself to my feet, swaying slightly. I looked at the half-eaten bar in my hands, my stomach rolling at the thought of food. I threw the bar in the river and shoved the wrapper in my backpack. I drank half a water bottle, suddenly desperate for that cleansing cold on my palate. I contemplated leaving, but I didn't. I certainly didn't want to continue after it, but to go back now would mean walking during dusk. I wouldn't be back to my car before dark. If there's one thing I was always told, it's that there is never a good enough reason to be walking through the woods at night. The predators came out at night. I cautiously got back on track, keeping my pace slow so as not to catch up to nothing. Because there was nothing there. Right? I walked for another hour or two, hyper-aware now of every sound and movement. At one point I thought I heard more words behind me. There was also a faint smell, not one of decay but still like something I'd smelt before. I kept on moving. The spot I was looking for was only a little further and I found myself hurrying despite my fear, ready to set up camp and hide myself away for the night. It seemed like the sun was setting before I knew it. By then, I had made it into the clearing I generally used as camp, which I'd finished setting up in no time. Where I was off the trail quite a bit. It required a fair amount of effort getting to, being as it was through the thicket of non-trail, but I felt oddly safer, tucked into an innocuous part of the forest I was sure only I knew about. I'd stumbled upon it by accident a couple years ago, after getting briefly lost. I contemplated setting a fire like I usually would, which is probably frowned upon, I know, but I felt like it would draw too much attention. That feeling of being watching, like tiny pin pricks along my skin, had started up again. I forced myself to breathe as I sat in front of my tent and choked down a peanut butter sandwich for dinner. The full darkness of night soon prevailed. The stars shone brightly through the trees and I lay down on a blanket to watch them for a while. It was then, as I managed to find a small semblance of peace, that a twig cracked in the distance. I frowned and sat up, peering into the darkness around me, though I couldn't see past where the clearing ended. I was just reaching for my flashlight when the wind blew again, my hair lifting with it. And there was that sickly sweet smell of decay. Panic started to set it. I hurriedly moved into my tent, zipping it up securely. I hugged my knees to my chest and listened, squeezing my eyes shut as the noises grew more frequent. Another broken branch, shuffling of leaves, ragged breathing. I found myself shaking my head, thinking that this couldn't be happening, not now, not to me. Look. Trail. The voice was just as grating as before. Wait. Dark. It grew closer. I could hear the moment it stepped into the clearing, the sound of brush giving way to the whispering of grass. My mind was going 100 miles an hour, trying to piece things together. The smell, the limited words, the clop-clop of cloven feet. It hit me suddenly what it was. What it had to be. Goatman. I'd read about him plenty of times on No Sleep, I'd laughed those stories off. I certainly wasn't laughing now, as Goatman shuffled closer to my tent. He began circling it. There. Dark. Wait. He repeated, pausing his steps every now and then. I was praying he'd go away, maybe he didn't know I was in here, maybe he'd get bored. Dark. Ambush. Tent. What? Where had he heard that? Because that's what this was, right? He only had words he'd heard before, who on this trail had said that? My panic continued to rise, though I didn't dare make a move. Twigs snapped suddenly, somewhere in the direction of the trail. My head snapped to it involuntarily and I had a sickening image of Goatman doing the same thing, listening for more words. The footsteps that grew closer sounded like they were being made by someone desperately trying to keep quiet but failing. Why do you need camo for fishing? I thought again, this time just a bit hysterically. Goatman happened to have stopped on the opposite side of the tent, which favored him by allowing him to remain unseen. Not that it wasn't almost pitch dark out there, save for the moon and stars. Goatman lingered for a second, my attention snapping between him and the bumbling from the other direction, before he ambled away into the night. There was a second where I stayed perfectly frozen before that survival instinct I mentioned finally kicked in. I scrambled to grab my wallet from my backpack, then shoved it in a pant pocket. Keys, check. Phone, check. Flashlight, it'll give me away if I use it but it's heavy duty, good for swinging, check. Shoes tied, check. Deep breath, I paused to inhale deeply, check. I put my hand on the zipper and stopped to listen. They were probably just about at the edge of the trees. The opening of the tent wasn't facing towards them but it wasn't facing away, either. But Goatman had gone that way so that was a no-go anyway. The steps stopped and I knew they must be looking right at me. I took a second to decide how to approach my escape. I'd already decided that my tent belonged to the woods now, and my backpack would only slow me down. Do I hurtle out and book it? Or do I casually get out and then run? I placed my hand on the zipper, it was now or never. The sound of the zip seemed as loud as a gunshot. I slowly climbed out, making sure not to appear aware of the eyes on me. I gave a slow stretch, eyes steady ahead. I took a breath and pushed down all my fear and panic. Then I broke into a dead sprint. I heard one of the men shout but I didn't hesitate as I ran towards the forest. The plan was to run straight and then cut right, to get back onto the trail. I knew if I got on the trail that I could outrun them. I could hide if I needed once I was far enough away. They thundered after me, cursing loudly. I hit the layers of trees with a stumble but my momentum kept me going. I couldn't see more than a few feet in front of me, the trees' black lines cutting through the gray. My arms got scratched as branches whipped past. I wanted to turn my head to see if they were close. I could make out the sound of their steps over mine. I wanted to see if I could make out any sign of the trail I was running parallel to, but I didn't dare do so, for fear of tripping horror movie style. I fell anyway. 1 second I was upright and the next I was falling, landing hard on my shoulder. My flashlight was lost to the dark forest floor. Dirt covered my hands as I scrambled to get to my feet again. I was too late. A hand closed around the back of my shirt, yanking me harshly back. A scream almost tore itself from my throat, but then a hand was over my mouth, another one winding around my waist. I thrashed and tried to kick out, digging my hands into his arm around me. He held steady, laughing between pants, "Shoulda known you were a runner." His hand slid lower over my hip despite my efforts. Tears filled my eyes and spilled down my cheeks like traitors. His buddy showed up behind us, slowing his gait to a light jog. He was breathing far heavier than the one holding me. "Bitch is fast, ain't she? You know I love when they fight, though." The hand over my mouth loosened for a second as his other one moved to the button of my pants. Blind panic shot through me and I bit down as hard as I could, warm copper filling my mouth. "Fucking whore," he yowled, grip going slack. I threw my entire weight forward, once again sent sprawling. The next seconds were a blur of hands grabbing at me, rocks digging into my hands as I struggled to get traction. I was sure for a moment that this was it, I was done for. I had thought Goatman would be my end, not this, not like this. My hands touched metal just as my ankle was grabbed. I didn't hesitate, used the grip on me as leverage to twist around and swing. There was a crack as the flashlight connected with bone, the hand released me, the man it was attached to was yelling. I swung blindly once more, striking something soft this time. The hands reaching for me were gone. I no longer tried to run forward, instead I focused on getting to the path, cutting into the woods at a 90-degree angle. I was on all fours for a couple feet before I was finally vertical. My heart was pounding harder than ever, tears and snot were running down my face. The taste of blood stained my tongue. I was more or less staggering through the brush, breathing heavily. "Hide," my brain was yelling, "hide, hide, you're making too much noise." So I hid. I made out a patch of ferns in the dark, dropped to my knees and crawled into it. I pressed my back to a tree, facing the trail, they wouldn't see me. I tried to calm my breathing but couldn't stop the way it hitched on sobs. I could hear them once again trudging toward me, slowly this time. They were whispering harshly back and forth. "You think she made it back on Dash? Bitch. You talkin' ain't gon' help us. Bitch." Goatman gurgled from next to me. I had to clap a hand over my mouth to stop from screaming. I slammed my eyes shut, trying to stop from sobbing. "Shoo." He sounded pleased with this new word. He was crouched next to me, I could tell, could feel his rotten breath on my face, could only imagine what he looked like next to me. Cloven feet and sideways pupils, focused on me, watching, listening. Rough fingers were run gently over my hair, trailing over the side of my face. There was a moment where I was nothing but the personification of frozen. Runner. Fast. SH. Did you hear that? Close, the men were close. What was a worse way to die? By their hands or Goatman's? Sounded like talking. Talking. Goatman mused next to me. Ambush. And then he was gone once more, heading back towards my tent. His steps weren't light, branches crunching under his feet as he went. Listen, that way. Going back toward her tent. Must be. Come on, she may have a phone. And after Goatman they went. I sat there, dumbfounded that I was still alive. I sat there, breathing, amazed that I still was. Then I got to shakily to my feet, making my way to the trail as quietly as possible. The relief that washed over me when the sound of the stream reached me was bittersweet. I had miles to go before I was out of the woods, both figuratively and literally. I started running when my feet reached the beaten-down soil of the path. I didn't stop when the screaming started. I certainly didn't look back when it started to echo. I didn't stop till I hit the trailhead, dawn just beginning to bleed light through the canopy of trees. My feet ached, cramps had me clutching my sides, my muscles were screaming. I paused only to throw up, dry heaving long after my stomach was emptied. There was a brief, sinking moment of terror when I saw my car, and their truck, in the parking lot, the thought that they'd done something to it suddenly hitting me. They evidently didn't think I'd be making it out alive, as my car started fine. My hands were shaking as they gripped the wheel. They were shaking the whole drive home and long after I'd made it there. I locked all my doors, pulled all the blinds, closed all the curtains. I showered and sobbed and brushed my teeth till my gums were red. I chased a sleeping pill with a bottle of water, then took another just for good measure. I slept and thankfully didn't dream. I wrote this all just now, after waking up. This is just as much a warning as it's a way to get it off my mind, so I can hopefully push it all down. I finish with this: if you ever find yourself alone in the woods with monsters, pray that there's something worse out there. It may be the only way you survive. And if that something worse happens to be Goatman, don't you dare say a word. Because if you have, then I'm afraid it may be too late. Second story. This story was shared by you/Stronghold 1014. Tales from the Goatman's house, I heard it too. So this is a story about a scary evening with what me and my friend assumed to be a ghost of some kind at his old house, which was formerly owned by a sketchy goat farmer. If you guys like it, I've got several more to tell. Let me know. So one night, probably around 2 or 3 years ago, me and a buddy are hanging out at his house. It was a Friday, and neither of us had to work Saturday shifts, so we did what we usually do in that instance: sit around, get buzzed and watch horror flicks. We were watching one of our shared favorites, when all of a sudden the power flickers and eventually goes out completely, and at one of the scarier parts of the movie no less. We didn't think much of it though, seeing as how they were calling for a storm to hit us that night. So we light a few candles, crack open a few more drinks and just start discussing the movies we had watched before the power went when all of a sudden I hear something. I heard what sounded like a woman's voice outside the window. It sounded exactly like his mom. Being that his mom lived literally right next door, I didn't think anything of it. This event followed. "Hey Chris, I think your mom is calling." "Yeah, I heard it too. I wonder why she's up so late. I'm sure she's just making sure we're okay, what with the power outage and all." Voice gets closer and closer until it sounds as if it's right at the window my friend is sitting in front of. He stands up to open the door and check it out. He slowly shuts the door, turns around, and is white as a sheet. "Bro, there's no one there." He calls his mom, she answers and lets us know how frustrated she is with Chris's call waking her up, but asks for us to bring the portable heater because the power cut off hers. So after freaking out and trying to figure out what to do, we decide to just grab the heater, throw the door open and make a break for it. Upon exiting and beginning our sprint, I heard a third set of footsteps closing in from behind. When we made it to her back door and grabbed the knob, they suddenly stopped. To this day we don't know what happened that night, but rest assured, I don't go over there anymore if the Weather Channel is calling for a storm. Third story. This story was shared by you/WelshGuy78. My encounter with the Goatman. During 1999 I worked briefly as a vacuum cleaner salesman. Yes, the job was as terrible as it sounds, which required very late nights as I was often at customers' homes till around 9 p.m., before having to go back to the head office to check out, then drive back home, often not arriving home until 12 to 1 a.m. I was working late this one particular night and was on the home stretch, around 10 minutes from home, when my old crappy cheap Ford Fiesta started to overheat. I knew the car wouldn't make it home and had no choice other than to pull into a lay-by on top of the big, dark, deserted mountain next to my town. My hometown is literally the last town before there are just mountain and forests for countless miles. As I pulled into the mountain parking area with steam pouring my engine, this is 100% true by the way, a white humanoid figure, obviously surprised that a car was pulling into a deserted parking space in the middle of the night, ran directly front of my headlights as it sprinted from the edge of the clear side of the parking area and into the forest on the other side. It had no clothes, features, genitals and hair etc., just a white figure with 2 arms and 2 legs that appeared almost luminous and reflective in my lights. To say I shit myself is a bit of an understatement. My eyes popped out of my sockets when it ran in front of me, but then I realized that I was stuck in a dead car in a deserted mountain lay-by in the middle of the night with no mobile phone signal, as this was back in the days when mobile phones were just starting to become popular, but large chunks of the country were missing from network coverage. I had no choice but to sit there for around an hour until my car cooled down, as it gave up the ghost pretty much the second I pulled in. So I sat in my car, alone, staring directly into the forest where the thing I saw had run. No weapon, no way to contact anyway to let them know where I was, and no passing traffic to possibly flag down. During my wait in the car, I obviously started to wonder what I had seen. I knew for a fact that I had actually seen something, and it was not a trick of the light, that much was clear. I discounted sheep, horses, foxes or any other animal that populated the Welsh mountains, as I was certain it a 2-legged humanoid creature shape with roughly human head, body, arms and legs proportions. The obvious answer would have been that it was some very strange man who for some reason was wearing a white entire body stocking, think Charlie's Greenman in It's Always Sunny, but since we were miles away from the nearest home and I was the only car around, it's highly unlikely that someone would have spent hours walking through thick forests just to hang out at a parking area in the middle of a forest wearing a unitard. Since I could rule out possible animals or humans, I had to consider the alternative, which isn't a nice thing to think about when you are stuck in a broken-down car with this creature very possibly still outside. I didn't think it was aliens, as it was too tall compared to the classic look, while any type of apparition or ghost doesn't tend to run away from people when surprised. I'm not sure if there is some kind of Welsh version of a Wendigo, but if I had to categorize the encounter, this would be my number 1 choice. There was always talk of satanic rituals and witches practicing in the forest when I was a kid, and also of illegal bare-knuckle fights where people had been killed and buried there to cover up the crime, but I didn't think much of it at the time and always wrote it off to superstition and rumor. But now I'm not so sure. Eventually my car cooled down enough for me to limp back home. No one really believed me when I told them what I saw and are adamant that it was a sheep, but to this day I will swear that the creature I encountered was something different. I've been in the forest many times since camping, biking and hiking and have never seen anything like that again, but whenever I go there I am always aware of the possible presence of the Goatman. 4th story. This story was shared by you/Lord Colbito. The Goatman peering through my window. After what happened to me all those years ago, the one place in the entire world that rattles my body and sends chills up my spine happens to be my grandmother's farm. When my parents and I visited my grandma's 1-story cottage every 3 years, I was put in the same room. The room and all its velvet blankets and puffy pillows had a cozy vibe to it, along with the rest of the house. But at nighttime, the large window in front of the bed painted a picture of the unsettling wilderness outside, which didn't soothe my vibrant imagination. And ever since I was 6, my brain terrified me with that imagination, using vivid nightmares, night terrors, sleep paralysis, hallucinations, and everything in between. So naturally, my fear of the window was warranted. Most kids have monsters under their beds or in their closets, but at my grandma's house, my boogeyman lurked outside that window. The first time I ever saw it was at 2 o'clock in the morning, and my rapid hyperventilation was the only thing stopping me from squealing in panic. The creature, which I assumed was a figment of my imagination, was at the edge of the woods staring at the window. It was a goat standing on two legs, its body shape a furry caricature of a human's and its claws dangling around its thighs. I slammed my eyes shut and shielded me with my soft blanket, waiting for the thing to evaporate from my imagination. As you can guess, I was dog-tired by the time I woke up. That morning, while my parents were at the town's Walmart and I was trying to forget last night's experience, I had a pleasant and light-hearted conversation with Grandma. We loved to talk, and we had a special type of chemistry that transcended our generational differences. Curious about her farm, I wanted to know about all her animals. "Well, we have all sorts of animals," she said with a toothy grin. "I have chickens, peacocks, pheasants, mules, sheep, hogs, ducks, horses, ponies, bantams. I'll allow any animal on this farm besides goats." "Goats?" I asked, recalling the form outside my window. "Why don't you like goats? I mean, can't you milk them and make cheese?" Grandma's face darkened, and she stroked her fingers through her gray hair as her eyes stared into space. "Well, according to some people, after God created sheep, Satan, in an effort to desecrate God's sheep, created goats, an imperfect species. God, wrathful after Satan disgraced his sheep, created wolves to eat goats. In a massive tantrum of rage, the devil bit the tails off the goats, marking them as an unholy species." With a quizzical and hard-to-decipher face, she said, "I thought you would have seen it by now, haven't you?" I knew what she was talking about in an instant, and it seemed I would burst into a fit of scared shrieking and crying at the thought of my grandmother confirming the thing outside my window was real. I tried to rationalize the situation, thinking the goat-like creature was just a dream and that what my grandma said was unrelated. But at the sight of my distress, my grandmother destroyed that idea with the opening of her mouth. "It won't hurt you if you stay inside at night. There's nothing to worry about." It was supposed to be a comforting statement, but a double confirmation of one of my mythical boogeymen not being mythical shuddered me. Grandma pretended to forget the conversation, never speaking of it for the rest of the trip. That night, I decided to sleep in my parents' room, where the bed faced away from the window, but I swear I heard a glassy tapping from behind me. Luckily for my sanity, my parents and I left the farm the next day, leaving behind the rural forests and fields of Maryland. But 3 years after the initial incident, after blocking the creature from my memory, I saw it a second time at 11 o'clock at night. I'd been snoozing on Grandma's couch to the sound of the TV when a reporter shouting, "Breaking news," jolted me awake. My eyes initially darting around the room and my brain adjusting to consciousness, I gaped at the creature hunched over in front of the living room window. The half-goat sprang from the window and ran into the distance on its 2 legs. I slapped myself, saying, "Snap out of it, snap out of it." But nothing could stop the memories of the creature and what Grandma said about it from hurtling out of the darkest pit of my mind. I paced around the room with adrenaline flooding my arteries, wanting to flee but not knowing where to go. With a few sleeping pills, however, I willed myself to sleep with the living room curtains drawn. The morning after, I found a note on the kitchen table. My parents were shopping, and Grandma was at a doctor's appointment. I was alone in the house, and with undaunted intent to find out what was going on, I plugged in my grandmother's outdated Macintosh for a bit of research. "Half goat, half man," I typed, which brought up a Wikipedia page on satyrs and fawns. Not exactly what I was looking for. "Goat creature in Maryland," I corrected. And as soon as I searched that, Google presented me with another Wikipedia page, this one on a creature known as the Goatman of Maryland. This was precisely what I was looking for, and I proceed to peruse the page. The Goatman of Maryland is a legendary half-goat half-human creature that has the head and hindquarters of a goat and the body of a human. The page went on to explain how local Marylanders suspect the Goatman is either a failed gene-mixing science experiment or a demonic spawn of Satan, as Grandma insinuated. Getting worked up in the midst of my research, I had two primary suspects as to who created the creature: the Henry A. Wallace Beltsville Agricultural Research Center, which wasn't far from the farm, and the Satanic Temple, which had a goat person called the Baphomet as its symbol. However, I had to rule out both of these candidates, since the Beltsville Research Center never did any genetic experiments on goats and the Satanic Temple was an atheist organization that didn't believe in Satan. This left me to continue wondering what the hell this thing was. For the rest of the week, I saw it every single night. While I tried to fall asleep in my room, it would be staggering around the clearing outside my window. If I were watching TV late at night, the Goatman would be gazing at the screen from the living room window. And on the last day, when I was feeding Grandma's peacocks in the evening, she came to bring me inside after she saw it approaching the farm. By the end of the second visit, seeing the Goatman was a usual occurrence, and with the occasional reminder from Grandma, I respected it and its personal space. 3 years later, however, my third visit to Grandma's ranch showed me what happened when you didn't honor the Goatman's boundaries. On the local news, there was one headline stirring up the rustic community. 10 professional boar hunters killed in animal attack. My parents thought it was horrible, but Grandma and I shot each other looks of shared knowledge. The next morning, the paper arrived at the farm, where the hunting tragedy made the front page. Yesterday evening, police found 10 renowned hunters, mutilated to death by a wild animal. The Hunters AR-15 magazines were completely full upon death, and local authorities are stumped as to how none of them could have gotten a shot off. My parents, who had no knowledge of the Goatman, had no idea what caused the attack and were as ignorant as the confounded investigators. So I had to ask Grandma why my parents hadn't seen it yet. Well, she said, the creature only appears to those who interest it. It's apathetic towards some, including your parents. Empathetic towards others, like it is with us. But it also shows antipathy towards particular people, such as those hunters who didn't respect its turf. You have to understand it can change its views on people. I have scars from when I was a girl, but after it got used to me, it stopped. My parents, who were your great-grandparents, were demoted to the low end of the thing's opinions. Their passing and my survival go to show how unpredictable it can be. I was shaking and, shall I say, more than freaked out by that. The thing had attacked Grandma when she was young, and it seemed like the Goatman could change its opinion of me in the blink of the eye. For all I knew, it swapped its views of people like a teenage girl changes clothes. It had seemed like I developed an affinity with the creature during my last visit by seeing it all the time and watching TV with it. And not once did I go outside in the night, when it was in charge of the farm. I'd respected it. Could it really forget all that? Or was I reading into Grandma's statements more than I should have? In the visits following that year, I read news articles about mutilated hikers, missing campers, and farm animals turning up dead. The Goatman was getting more aggressive. One time, the creature looked right into my soul with its black, empty eyes, and for the first time since my initial viewing of it, my body succumbed to unimaginable dread. The more violent the news stories became, the more my relationship with it deteriorated. And I could sense the same happening to Grandma. She was buying up more curtains for the house, acquired a better lock for the door, and went to a shooting range to learn how to use a shotgun. It came to the point where I tried to appease the creature by leaving pig food in the field for it to eat, but instead, it snatched one of the hogs from the pig pen and ran into the woods. On the last day of that visit, I woke up to the sound of ear-splitting banging on the front door. Grandma was gripping her new shotgun, and with my dad holding a baseball bat, they waited for the intruder to burst through the door. Yet the banging subsided after a few minutes, the chirping and croaking of crickets and frogs replacing it within the hour. After that incident, we didn't visit the ranch for 5 years, and I was nearing the end of high school by then. My parents encouraged Grandma to move out of her house in light of people in her town being discovered murdered in their own homes, but being the stubborn Marylander she was, she decided against it. Besides, she thought she knew how fortified her cottage was. A few weeks ago, we returned to that awful farm, finding barbed wire strewn about the outskirts of the field. There were fewer animals there than there was half a decade ago, and I swear some of the surviving pigs had faded scars on their bodies from scratches, stabs, and bites not even the most vicious bear could manage. I was more jittery than I'd ever been in my life, and that's not a hyperbole. I was jumpier than when I took the SAT, 10 times more jittery than when I asked my crush to prom, and feeling like a soldier going to war on a foreign continent. And it was all because I knew that Goatman was scheming someone in the deep woods, sensing my arrival on its territory. I spoke with Grandma, who showed me a newspaper talking about how the FBI was getting involved in the murder investigations in rural Maryland and that the perpetrator would be behind bars soon. However, as Grandma told me, other farmers around town were speaking about how the FBI's true motive was to cover up the real culprit. I poked at my food during dinner, ignoring the discourse my family was having. Afterwards, I sauntered to my room and made sure the door was shut before I hopped into bed and waited. After hours of anticipating, in the field beyond my window, the monster dragged the bloodied body of a peaceful doe into view. The Goatman ripped the deer's intestines out and gnawed at its insides with its death-loving fangs, spilling blood onto the moonlit ground. It turned its head to face my direction, hurling a piece of deer at the window. I jerked as blood splattered against the pane like a sheet of rain, startling me to full awareness. Me rushing from my bed to get a closer look at the field, I saw the Goatman had left behind the deer corpse. It was mocking me, and I was sure of it. I settled back to bed with the blood sliding down the window, wrapping myself in my blanket as if it was armor and preparing for whatever might happen next. I have no idea how, but I drifted asleep with a piece of the creature's latest meal stuck to my window. That was when I had the worst nightmare any human mind could produce. It was a once-in-a-lifetime dream of horror where the creature had crept into my room and was slicing chunks of muscle from my limbs and carving blocks of my flesh out of my torso with its claws, chocking me with its horns. The pain was real, and I smelled the rotten stench of the creature's dirt-matted fur. It was as if my mind was nagging at me and screaming at the top of its lungs for me to wake up, so I did. Soaked in sweat, I sent my eyes flying open, gasping like I'd drowned to near death. As I scrambled to see any sign of the Goatman's presence outside, I panicked upon seeing several inconsistencies with how the room was when I went to sleep. The door was wide open, and something had smeared deer blood on the inside of the window. And that's when the monotonous tapping reached my ears, not from the window, but from my bed frame. Two furry hands slumped over the frame, claws dripping blood onto the sheets. I froze, the form getting to its feet and tilting its head as it examined me. Too weak to fight and too shocked to run, I waited to die. But to my surprise, instead of slashing my belly, the Goatman spoke. "You be not ripe," it said before crouching on all fours and scurrying out of the house. When the police arrived, they found the lifeless body of Grandma, who had died of a heart attack. After that, the FBI showed up, erasing all evidence of forced entry and the strange incidents of deer blood being inside the house. My sobbing and traumatized parents took us to a hotel, and I rejoiced at the fact our room was on the 3rd floor. I shed a few tears and had a good rest, the thought of what the creature had said zipping through my mind. That was 2 weeks ago, and until now, I believed I would never have to see that farm for the rest of my life. But as it turns out, my grandmother had left the farm to me. Not only that, she explicitly stated in her will that I should also inherit her shotgun. I don't want to go back there, but since she died, I feel a weighty guilt dragging me down. My heart desires for me to follow her last wishes, and they involve going back to Maryland with her gun. I'll try getting a priest to bless the farm or an American Indian elder to perform a smudging ritual, although I'm skeptical about those ideas working. I don't know when I'll have to return, I just know it has to be soon. Or else, plenty others will die. Fifth story. This story was shared by you/Chilectrixone. Goatman in the Mountains. You see, I was young and my imagination was wild, but what I am about to tell you still terrifies me to these days. I went camping. The camp was located in the mountains. We went for 2 weeks, but hell, these weeks would turn into. It was a night for telling stories, scary stories. Also, I was the only person sitting with my back to the fence. The fence was a barber fence and the bushes were growing on the other side. We had animals, so we took care of them. So here we had deer, wolf, 2 horses, and few wild birds. So everyone was telling scary stories. We were 17 people around the fire, all girls and boys. Then my turn came to tell a story, and I decided to tell the story of the Goatman. I started with telling the Anansi story. Everyone knows the story, so I don't think I need to write the whole story, but when I was telling them about the guys in the story being freaked out and hiding in the trailer, a goddamn branch snapped behind my back. Don't forget, I was sitting with my back to the fence. Everyone bolted up and I almost jumped over the damn fire pit. One of the boys, Vlad, pointed his flashlight to the darkness of the woods and we tried to see something, anything, for 5 minutes we were staring, nothing. Have in mind that the flashlight was strong enough to see nearby. After 5 minutes we decided to sit back and I continued with the story, keeping on and reaching the part with the girls screaming in terror. I shit you not, right behind my back the sound of the bushes made my skin rise in goosebumps. Rustle, rustle. Like someone or something was taunting us. The sound was like someone brushed their hand on this thick bush. Everyone jumped and Peter, a rather tall boy, screamed, "Stop it, it's not funny, stop fucking with us." He was scared despite being the tallest of us. The second thing that made me chilled to the bone, the animals went crazy. The deer was running in her cage. The wolf, which always was running in his big cage at night time, was now whimpering in his den. The horses were running further from the fence we were around. That was it. All of us started to freak out. By this point the boys were scared more than the girls. I looked at them and said, I am close to the end, I'll finish the story and we're out of here. One of the girls screamed into the darkness, if this is our head, boys and head girls, please stop. It's not funny. Everyone heard someone coming from the cottages we were staying in. The guys were coming our way, were our headman and head girls. We were terrified, looking at the fence and back to them. There's no way that they got so fast to the cottages without us noticing. They told us to cut the pranks off and put out the fire and go back to the dormitories. As I promised, I almost finished the story when we all smelled something like rotting eggs, disgusting and strong. Someone suggested that someone threw something in the fire pit or the animals' cages were not clean, but I knew damn well it was not it. The damn thing or animal decided to make the most uncommon noise behind my back. I jumped over the pit and we all huddled in one place. As Vlad pointed his flashlight, we all froze like an animal freeze. We did. I still remember that moment in my life. From the darkness of the forest, reflected by the flashlight, were peering at us a pair of yellow eyes. The height for these eyes was not okay with me. We were staring at each other for good 10 minutes when it decided to bare its teeth and screech at us. We all bolted, forgetting about the damn fire. As I turned around, these damn eyes were peering at us and shinning in the damn darkness without the flashlight. We all run inside our dormitories and the head boy of ours asked us, what the hell is going on? Why you didn't put out the fire? He was angry, but we didn't care. We refused to go back there again. When he came back after putting the fire out, he looked paler than usual and said for us to go and sleep. He locked the doors and windows, which we never did before. All of us couldn't sleep, hearing the strangest noises coming from the woods, noises that were not like any animal we knew. This night nor we, nor the animals were calm. The next morning we went to look at the place where we had our stories. I shit you not, the bone fire was destroyed. The bushes, where I was sitting, were bent together with the fence, and then the most chill realization came over me. There was a hole in the fence, like someone tried to sneak in. It was torn like it was a piece of paper to this thing. Needless to say, I was shocked, I was shaking, and my friend came and said, I don't think we all imagined that. But, why did you decide to tell that story? I was speechless. As we were passing our days, mostly all of us decide never to talk about it again. When I was about to leave, I saw our head boy near the fence peering into the woods, so I went to him. I called out to him and he motioned to come closer, so I did. He said, "You know, that night when I came out to put out the fire, I smelled something disgusting, rotting. The moment I heard this noise near the fence, I saw something that scared me to death. There was a silhouette of something standing in the darkness, bending over the fence with two yellow glowing eyes, punching over the fire pit. I screamed and ran back to the cottages. When he paused and was shaking, when I looked back it was gone. I guess you didn't lie." Next morning I saw a hole in the fence and the animals were jumpy, so I saw from the other side of the fence, prints, but not ones of a boar, doe, elk or some other animal. Those were cloven like goats. He looked at me with teary eyes. I felt regret telling that damned story. I didn't think that it will become such a terrifying reality. Just a myth, right, just a story. Years pass and I still can't bring myself go alone camping or going to the mountain, only in big groups. So that's my story. I felt like it was a long time till I made myself write this here, so I hope people will learn, never to mess around with him. Thanks a lot for watching the video till the end. Subscribe to our channel Horror in Detail. Drop your opinions/suggestions in the comments section, and like the video as it helps with the YouTube algorithm.